Okay, good morning, everyone. Some of you have been together with me last night for a very nice tour, walking tour, in the center of Rome. It was a pleasure to have such a guide. I don't know before, but he was very smart and he was able to introduce us to several things that I completely ignore about Rome and the history of Italy, and with some connection with Greece, France, Spain, so it was very funny, and also the pizza we had together was very nice. This was really the center of Rome, that as you probably already know before coming here, is a sort of museum. It is very nice to walk and to get some explanation about the history. 2,000 years or more of history in Italy are open air. Okay, but today we need to start with our formal program that is about developing paper of young scholar. So this is the purpose of these 2 days. So we start now with the pleasure to have with us the president of EURAM, Sibel Yamak. Yes, Sibel is really a person that I know. Well, I think we met in EGOS 1999 or 1998.
Yes.
Yes, so probably we are not any more PhD, probably, because after 20 years, probably we have done something. And it was a very nice experience for me to have Sibel in that EGOS conference at work week. At work
That's
week.
right.
We were in the
That's
same, you know
right.
how it EGOS work, that you stay together with a group of people for a couple of days. So there is a strong interaction, and so I have the pleasure to meet and to like Sibel, both as a scholar and as a person. And I think she's really fantastic, but she will tell you something later about the EURAM view of this kind of event. And we have also the pleasure to have other senior colleagues, and Thomas, and Pierre, and Peter, and all other Stefan, and all the Silke, Mine. So we have several colleagues that can work together with you. So 2 words about Louis. Okay, Louis is a relatively recent institution. It was founded 40 years ago. It was not in this building. This building is relatively recent. This building was a school of nuns, and the main building was before in Viale Pola. Louis is growing in the last few years very much. So now we are not a big institution because we are only social science. So we have economics, management, law, and political science. So basically 4 departments. I am the head of the biggest department, the Department of Management, Business and Management. And we basically, as a Department of Management, we cover half of Louis, because clearly the students are more in our department, in our programs. We offer both Bachelor and Master of Science program. And the university is growing. Now we have more than 9,000 students. We plan to overcome 10,000 soon. And we are recruiting people from abroad because we want to become more and more international. Until 10, 15 years ago was more a teaching university. Now it's becoming more international and more research university. The owner of Louis is a foundation, but on top there is Confindustria. Confindustria is the Industry Association of Italian Entrepreneurs. So this can explain the link that we have with the Italian companies. It is very active. And in Rome, you can also take profit of ministers. It's really a very relationship-based environment. And you can leverage on this relationship if you want to create events or conferences. And we plan to increase in our department probably about 15, 20 people in 3 years. And we will go to economy soon with another call of professors. So we want to clearly push a bit on this side. And what I can tell you, we have several campuses. This is a campus for economics, management, and political science. We have another campus only with the Faculty of Law, another campus with the School of Law and the School of Government, and then we have a campus with the Business School. It is a relatively renewed and recently opened villa that is something, I would say, superb in terms of fantastic landscape, and also very expensive, obviously. And so we basically took a villa, a set of villa. There is a main villa that is superb in terms of, it's fantastic. So I hope we will have the pleasure in the future to come and to teach or to be involved with our students, because it's really fantastic. And we renovated the villa. It took about 10, 15 years because of the municipality. The previous owner was the municipality of Rome. And clearly the villa is so beautiful that it's under the control of the minister of arts. And so anything that you want to change, even a plant, should be approved. So it's very, very, but it's a nice place where to study and to work. We organize several conferences. I organized a conference in September. The corporate governance conference was really fantastic. So we are growing in terms of assets, in terms of people, in terms of students, but the competition, is very tough. So it will be not easy. And we'll see in the few years where we will arrive, but the aspiration is very high, and we try to do our best to reach the other competitors in the market in Europe, at least. Okay. Sibeli,
okay.
After you.
Thank you so much. A warm welcome to all of you. I see some familiar faces. It's always a pleasure to meet them, but I'm delighted to see some new faces as well. So welcome to EURAM family. Today I just want to start by thanking Louis University for hosting us in their splendid campus in Rome. And I would like to thank Alessandro, my old friend. He forgot to tell that. He was one of the colleagues who invited me to organize a subtrack at EURAM. So it was my first organization at EURAM, thanks to him and to some other colleagues. So thank you so much, Alessandro. Thanks to you, to your team, because you did a great job in such a short time. In spite of your busy work schedule, I know how busy you are, and thank you so much to you, to your team. I would also like to thank Luisa Yafe, our executive officer. She helped us a lot during the organization process. And I would like to thank all our mentors and keynotes. I know how busy they are. They have multiple commitments, and in spite of the fact that they are so busy, they volunteered for the tasks. Thank you so much. We feel indebted. Thank you so much for your contribution to the EURAM Early Career Colloquium 2018. And I would like you to thank to the participants. Without you, there wouldn't be this event. So thank you so much for joining us for this Early Career Colloquium. Maybe I should talk a bit about EURAM.
You should.
Just a bit. It won't take long. Well, EURAM is a community of engaged scholars. We are sensitive to complex global problems that we have, actually, and we try to help organizations, managers, employees to adopt sustainable practices and policies in today's world. So we are sensitive to the cultures. We are open to all the paradigms, theories, models, methods. We do our best to support responsible, rigorous, and relevant management research, teaching, and practice. So this is a collaborative learning community. We devote a lot of time to get in touch with our colleagues across the world, with the practitioners across the world, and we have many new activities in relation to research, in relation to teaching, in relation to practice. In fact, Stefan is here. He's in charge of the relations with the practitioners, and he's just considering and actually organizing many activities for the practitioners as well. So, what I would say is that EURAM values so much critical thinking, creativity, diversity, equality, and we value inclusiveness. We are inclusive, and we have we are so sensitive to different cultures, diversities, and in fact, as an example, for example, our journal, European Management Review accepts manuscripts in different languages so that we can understand different cultures, different management thinking in different communities. So you can submit PMR in almost in many major languages. The process will be done in your own native language. Then, if it gets accepted, then you will have to translate your work into English. So we are open to many new ideas without limiting ourselves with anything. So EURAM is also organized through SIGs, Strategic Interest Groups. Please go to our website. You are going to see that they are dealing with many interesting topics. Probably you're going to find one which will fit your research area or your teaching or your practice. So maybe I should stop here. I hope your involvement will continue with EURAM for the newcomers. Please, if you have any questions, ask to the old EURAMers or ask us. So we will be very happy to help you. So welcome again. Thank you. We usually select a couple of papers to be presented at EURAM conference. This year, EURAM conference will be in Iceland. And at the end of the EECC, if your paper gets selected, then you can present it at EURAM conference and get additional feedback for that.
Yeah, that is a topic worth discussing a bit. It relates to a bad word, self-plagiarism. I hate that word, and the concept itself. I think it doesn't make any sense. In an academic life, you have on and on the same type of ideas which you shape and reshape, and eventually you finalize your thinking about it. That's the way I feel academia is about. Hence, presenting a paper in this context should allow you nevertheless to present it again in another conference, including in EURAM conference. Some people say, no, you should never do that. Once you've presented a paper somewhere, it's over. I mean, what about developing the paper, getting feedback, and on and on? So that's a major thing. And that, I suspect, was behind the question.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of the EECC program. The original concept was to take the raw material, the raw paper, and then through mentorship from here on to the conference, to shape those papers up to become a better paper in the conference track. That was the original concept. But one recognizes that the conference tracks can get tight. So I don't know how many spaces there are on the conference tracks.
Yeah.
That's what I don't know. But that was the original concept.
And I agree with you, Thomas, by the way. In fact, as a policy at EURAM, we do not limit the presentation. We go ahead with the speed dating. Stefan,
Thank you
can
very
you
much.
come here and lead us in this game?
Okay.
Definitely have 1 hour. So
1 hour, that's
We
fine.
can
That
work-
will work for the speed
Yeah.
dating. So good morning everyone from my side. I'm Stefan Grimberg from the University of Liechtenstein, acting also as a mentor. And since yesterday evening, since Sybil introduced me, I consider myself as an experienced early career colloquium participant.
You are
In fact, I have participated 6 times, so that's the 9th one. So yes, indeed, it is the case. It is a pleasure to see how the whole thing is growing. I vividly remember last year being in Morocco, Rabat, first time outside Europe. That was also a very good experience there. And thank you especially to you, Alessandro, for taking the lead this year and organizing the 9th EURAM Early Career Colloquium. It's now our pleasure to make something, as we learned from Alessandro, in a former nun school, which might fit somehow to that place, and that is called the speed dating. Has everyone participated so far in the speed dating? Hands up. Yeah, okay. At EURAM or outside EURAM? At EURAM. Outside EURAM? So what is the purpose of a speed dating? What would you say? You're too shy.
In academia or in general?
In general. And then we transfer that to academia.
It's about finding partners that you like and where you see that a relationship could grow out of it.
Exactly. So that fits perfectly well for private life, but also, of course, for academia. Good morning. Anything else? Yeah.
You need to teach yourself in a few minutes.
Exactly. You get exactly 1 minute for the speed dating, and then it will change. So you can start thinking about how you want to introduce yourself. And when you see then this kind of setting, what would you say? With lectures, very traditional format at the university. The purpose of speed dating is to interact. So I would like to ask you to change the whole setting now of the room a little bit for more interaction. So turn around 2 seat rows, and we will put the other chairs aside so that we get basically 2 rows where the chairs are on the opposite side. And then we play the game Traveling to Rome, so each one should find a seat. So if you can do that, please.
So we have this session, which is obviously a lie because I'm not sure we can tell you anything meaningful about building a successful career in management academia, but we can try. And so Thomas and I have decided that we will share this session and see what we can say that hopefully is meaningful. I think the main thing is for you to jump in. You have interesting things to say as well. And we should conduct this as much as a dialogue interaction as possible. Actually, when I was asked to do this, what hit me immediately was depression. When you get asked to do this kind of thing, it means you've definitely become an old fart. The only thing you can talk about is how you won the war in 1914 or 1945 or whatever. So I don't know, this is not a good sign, but anyway, I'll go do some gym afterwards and try to stay fit before I buy a wheelchair. So I guess looking back, I don't know how to say, because when I started, the world was very different. What mattered was purely local. International was a bit strange. Nobody worried about it that much, or very vaguely. And obviously the world has changed dramatically. I think there's a lot more international competition. Alessandro was talking about it. And so I tried to jot down, I don't have any slides, but Thomas has about 146, so he'll make up for it. And I tried to say what sort of would have been useful to me when I started. And I think the main thing would have been to get a better understanding of the world in which I was entering, which is the only thing I thought about was my own school, the local environment, and I guess it was less common or more expensive to go to international conferences. But I think getting to speak to people who come from a different environment, you realize that the rules of the game where you are one thing, but there are many other rules of the game in different parts of the world. And figuring that out, I think, is a major sort of element in order to be able to sort of build something in a deliberate way over the next few years.
So far, I agree.
It won't last. And what took me a long time to figure out, and I guess I have colleagues now who at one point or another were at Bocconi, and I have old colleagues about my age who are still at Bocconi. And I think they had the same syndrome that we had at HEC Paris in France, which was Bocconi was unquestionably the best business school in Italy. Italy is a reasonably prominent country in the world. Therefore, you're at the top of the world, and the rest of the world doesn't matter. And that's exactly how I felt. It comes with a bit of arrogance. It comes with a lot of ignorance. And I guess what really took me a lot of time to figure out is what is the landscape of management academia in the world. And I guess over the years, I realized that there were some things that we did at home that were irrelevant, completely irrelevant to colleagues that I spoke to elsewhere in the world. So the Bocconi people were polite because they had their own idiosyncrasies, and our crazy idiosyncrasies they just thought were strange French things, and I thought what they said were strange Italian things. I remember one colleague said, oh, to get tenure at Bocconi, you need to first write a book. Interesting. I thought, oh, okay. I was very impressed, not because I thought books didn't matter, but I thought you can't write a book before you're, 35 or something. And so figuring out that landscape, I think, is very important. So I'll give you this is where we're going to start disagreeing. So I think that we're in a world where there is a global set of business schools. I'll say at the top, it's not a value judgment, it's more of an economic observation. I would say the top 20, somewhere between 20 and 50, or the 50 top 20 schools in the US are part of that universe. So there are 50 business schools in the US who think they're among the top 20. So those 50 business schools are somewhere up there. Then in Europe, I'll let you decide, somewhere between 5 and 20 probably are in that league. There are a few Australian schools, there's probably 1 or 2 schools in Singapore, and I'm forgetting others. And what does it mean? It means that these schools primarily recruit on a fairly global market, which means that they're not so much interested, and I have to be cautious here, by the fact that you've devoted your entire life and you've been faithful to the school and you're sort of rooted in the local environment. They're more interested in, I would say, sort of somewhat international criteria in judging, for example, your applications, your eligibility for promotions, and so on and so forth. And I think you need to decide early on if that is a market in which you want to compete as an individual. So I'll tell you I'll make a confession. If I got an offer from Harvard tomorrow morning, I think I'd go. I'll make another confession. I doubt I will get an offer from Harvard tomorrow morning, or before I die, actually. But that's a question that you need to ask yourself. And there is no right or wrong answer. It's a very personal issue. Some people know they want to live in one place and they don't want to move. that's perfectly fine, but I think that's a decision you need to make fairly early on. And I don't think changes are not possible, but I think the longer you wait, the more difficult it is to make changes.
What are the consequences if you consider to be part of this top business schools? How would you describe then your work environment and relations with people? Because it seems like
I'm not
it's
sure
an
I
important
understand.
decision.
How you're saying, how do schools in this environment hire people and promote people, or what is day-to-day life in this environment?
What is day-to-day life, and what can be your expectations?
So whether we like it or not, and whether we think it's socially useful or not, is another story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think these schools claim to be primarily research-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do act on criteria that are what they call sort of research-oriented, with a somewhat clear understanding of what the hierarchy of publications are, which again is at least partially different from the. So I'm anticipating everything that Thomas will say. So I'm not saying all good research gets published in A journals. I'm not saying everything that gets published in A journals is good research.
You're not saying it, but you think it very loudly.
We can have a fight. But I think, well, I do think statistically it is more true. Now, that sort of assumes that the judgment on the quality of research is made by peers. Peers are biased. Peers are part of sort of thought, schools of thought. So there are a lot of caveats to that story. But I feel like saying, irrespective of what we each think, if we want to be in that league of schools, that is the game we have to be willing to play. So I think schools who assume that they are in that league will primarily hire people on the basis of sort of the publications that these people will be able to get in these journals. And it's not only quantity of publications, but quantity does matter. Its impact. I see more and more schools looking at Google citations, and everyone knows Google citations are crappy, and you get interviewed in your local soccer newspaper, you get a citation. I actually got a citation as the author of Les Précieuses Ridicules. I don't know if you know what it is, but it's a play by Molière, so written in the 17th century. And my grandfather back in 1930 wrote a sort of a school commented edition, or there was these little booklets for high school kids that sort of commented these plays. I guess in the UK it would be Shakespeare, and in Spain it would be, I don't know, Lope de Vega or something like that. And my grandfather, who happened to have the same first name, wrote an annotated edition of Les Précieuses Ridicules. And it's in my publication record, which I'm very proud of, being associated with Molière. You see, I don't count everything. I do like qualitative publications as well. And I also have someone who has the same name as me who does research in astrophysics. So I have a few papers in astrophysics. All I'm saying is I realize that this is not perfect, but I do think that by and large schools that think of themselves in that tier tend to look at that. So typically, if you're entering the job market, they will look at where you got your PhD, who your advisor was, what kind of a recommendation letter that advisor has written about you, and if you have R&Rs in what they consider to be top journals, and even better if you have a publication, and on and on. And then the whole system is geared at that because you get tenure only if you do publish in those journals, and beyond that you get promoted if you're in those journals. And so I'm at a university where you get a sabbatical. And I was very proud in my first 7 years. There was no tenure system in those days, so I was hired with a 6-month trial period. After 6 months, I had not insulted the dean, I'd not raped a student, and basically that was all it took to be sort of confirmed in your job. I don't know how it was at Bocconi in those days, but and so after 6 months I was confirmed in my job, and I did what everyone else was doing. I actually tended to write more pages than most of my colleagues, so I was considered to be a very productive scholar, whatever that meant. I actually wrote 2 books before I got my first sabbatical. One was a book version of my dissertation, and because I had connections to the US, and my mother was American, so she wanted me to go to the US, I said, okay. I didn't want to go for a PhD. I thought it was too far, too scary, and whatnot. Big mistake. I should have listened to my mother at least once, but too late. So I went to the US on sabbatical, and I went to NYU. And because we had a student exchange program with my school in NYU, I ended up in a closet at NYU. I basically thought, no one was there because it was a closet in a building where there was no one else. I tried to go see faculty, and most were too busy and uninterested. And they said, where'd you come from? And I said, France. And they said, are you at INSEAD? I said, no. And I hadn't even finished my sentence. They were already moving off to someone else. So I realized that I thought we were much better known at INSEAD, but obviously not. And when people had 3 more seconds to spend with me, they would say, oh, are you at that funny place where I had a colleague in finance called Bruno Solnik in the old days, and he was one of the few people who published in journals that everyone thought were unreadable at the school. They were things like the Journal of Finance, the Journal of Financial Economics, and I've learned since that these are A journals in finance. He was always very frustrated because no one paid attention to him. But obviously, the only thing that people at NYU knew about my school was actually this guy. So I thought, this is funny. Why? I know, is he friends with all these people? Does he play golf with them? What is going on? And little by little, the idea percolated that maybe his publications had something to do with it. And the most embarrassing moment in my professional life is I had been there for 6 months, and after a while, I'd had coffee with a few people, and one of these nice guys who was willing to spend the time of a coffee with me every, 2 weeks or so, said, oh, why don't you come and talk about your research at our brown bag seminar? And I said, oh, wonderful. And I thought, it's going to be difficult in an hour and a half. How am I going to be able to summarize 3 books and 2 textbooks? I didn't know they were textbooks, actually. I didn't know the notion of textbook in those days. So I show up and I start talking about how I'm trying to explain why some firms outperform others. And someone says, but there are a lot of reasons why firms might outperform others. And I said, yes, I want the whole story. And there was this look on their face. They were very polite. They didn't say anything. But I walked out of there with a very uncomfortable feeling, sort of saying, I don't think I really made it today. And I certainly didn't get a job offer after that. And I guess I started doing my homework and trying to figure out things, and I talked to people in a little more detail. And then I was lucky my sabbatical was in 2 pieces. I went to NYU, then I went to Michigan. At Michigan, I started talking to other people, and I was lucky that I had, without knowing actually, I built up a database. And some of you who are in strategy might know someone called Will Mitchell. Will Mitchell was the editor-in-chief of Strategic Management Journal. And he was a young professor at the University of Michigan in those days. He was on tenure track. He wanted to publish. And I asked him if he wanted to go to coffee. He said no, he was too busy trying to get articles written. I said, oh, well, would you like to play ping pong tonight? No, I'm too busy publishing articles. Okay. And at one point I must have said, oh, I have this sort of data that I don't know what to do with. His eyes sort of lit up. He said, data? Show me. And I had an Excel spreadsheet with data that was not very homogeneous. He flipped it around in all directions and says, oh, I see the paper we can write. I was, wow, but this is just, like an Excel spreadsheet. And I guess one thing led to another, and I saw what he was doing. I learned a few things, and I guess what I'm trying to say is this was a defining moment in my life. Unfortunately, I had already wasted a few years of my career. But at the same time, my own school was sort of starting to change. And I guess I was lucky enough that I was on the right side of that change. And again, things keep moving. Now we have a tenure track system. Now if you don't have a certain number of A publications, you won't get tenure. If you want a promotion, you need A publications. And I guess I'm trying to say that figuring out that world, if you want to compete in that universe, I think is important. What I would argue is not everyone wants to do that, and that is fine. But then figure out, I would recommend to figure out as much about the environment in which you are, not take what people tell you for granted. I guess I got so many pieces of bad advice over the years. Why? Because there is something that our marketing colleagues call cognitive dissonance. What do people try to tell you? And I'm probably doing the same. So don't take what I'm saying for granted.
No, please don't.
Is that they try to tell you that what they did was the right thing to do. And so I had colleagues who told me the main thing is you go to speak to business people, and if they think that what you're saying is smart, you're in business, in academia. But sort of the expression, you're doing well in academia. And it's very difficult not to believe it when you're new, you've arrived, you don't know what the references are. And I think the only way to form an informed opinion is actually to speak to as many people as you can in the universe that you want to belong to. And so in different schools, in different countries, there are different rules of the game. Italy has its own rules of the game. France has its rules of the game. For those of you who are in France, there are two subworlds in France. There's the business school world, which traditionally was considered to be sort of low-level, how would you say, professional schools. And there was the university system, which was very prestigious. I guess sort of recent evolutions favored business schools just because universities have no money anymore. They can't even pay their electricity bills, let alone give raises to faculty and so on and so forth, which changes things as well. And I guess economics do matter to some extent. But I think it's always, that's why I was asking Alessandro to tell us more about Luis. I'm interested in seeing how things are changing in Italy, how they're changing in Belgium, in the UK, everywhere I can figure out, because I think it's a very valuable sort of background to have and understand and know. You never know what will happen tomorrow and where you might want to live for whatever reason, so on and so forth. So I guess this is what I would like to argue. I think, so this is typical strategy. You know, if you want to figure out what the right strategy is, you first need to understand what's going on in the industry. There is no such thing as a good strategy irrespective of the industry in which you want to compete. Well, that's exactly the same for us. Then I think the other idea is you need to decide what your own strategy is. And I'm going to give you what I think is a very bad view of strategy, which I think strategy is making choices and choosing priorities. But I feel like saying, if you can, you should try to excel both in research and in teaching. And again, I do think we oppose research and teaching too much. I actually think that if you can teach well, it's a tremendous asset to have. I don't know if I teach well, but I've taught well enough to be invited and re-invited to teach in many different places. What it does is it gives you exposure. It allows you to meet people. The reason why I went to the University of Michigan and worked with Will Mitchell, which clearly changed my, I was going to say my life, but at least my academic life, was because they needed someone to teach the MBA program. I had taught a short course when I was on sabbatical. They invited me to go back which was the scariest experience in my life. I knew nothing about US business. You show up in a 90 MBA student room. After 2 sessions, there's a student who comes up and says, you know, your first lesson, I really didn't think I was getting my $200 worth of the course, but luckily the second class was better, so try to keep going. I must say, I walked out of class sort of slightly trembling. And they do pay a lot of money. They're 30 years old. They were at least middle managers. They know companies better than you do. So it was a sobering experience, but a very, I guess it was very educational for me. Actually, it taught me how to teach better when I came back home. Again, things lead to each other then, because I guess my evaluations weren't too bad in that MBA class. One of the good teachers at Michigan asked me if I wanted to teach in their executive education program. And I didn't know at the time, but I don't know if you see, but my eyes have dollar signs in them. We're in a business where, depending on where you are, compensation can be high or not so high. But clearly executive education, EMBA, maybe in some places MBA teaching is sort of interesting. Financially, it can be interesting intellectually as well. You learn about different countries in different ways. I enjoy traveling, which is not what everyone has to do, but sort of teaching has taken me to China, and I go actually between 6 and 10 times a year to teach a 2-day course in the EMBA of a university in Beijing, which is good for my teaching in France, because obviously China is sort of, I was going to say invading us, but at least occupying our concerns more than it used to. I've taught at EECC in Barcelona, and I mean, it sounds like I'm bragging, which I probably am, but I apologize. But what I'm trying to say is I think that teaching well matters as not as much. It matters as well as research. It might matter more, it might matter less. What I'm saying is some level of research, I think, is a prerequisite. And beyond that, I think teaching does make a big difference. Why? Because if someone invites you to teach and your course is a disaster, it creates lots of problems for people in positions of, I was going to say responsibility, you could call it bureaucracy as you want in business schools. And so if you teach well, you just save them a lot of problems. And so they like that. And I do think it's not that difficult to do. The best way to figure it out, and I'm sure you've learned, is go see people teach. If they teach poorly, you see very quickly what that means and why. If they teach well, there are probably lots of things to learn. And I guess I learned a lot from this kind of process. I guess the last thing I'd like to argue is that there's a fair amount of serendipity in career development, which is there are moments when you're lucky, you bump into the right person at the right moment. Other times you think you're going to create a wonderful connection with someone and it doesn't happen. But what I think you need to do is be open to these opportunities, but at the same time know what it is you want to do. Where is it you want to go? I guess in my view, I was always very reluctant to take on administrative positions. When a lot of people in my school saw that as, I'm the associate dean, so I'm your boss. I guess in a very, how can I say, how do you say, looking for the word in French, insolent way. I always considered I didn't have a boss. Right? Once you get tenure, they can say what they want. The only thing they can do is not promote you, which is okay, but you know. And I guess I thought I will take on administrative positions when I get old. And I waited long enough. I did take on some, but I was old enough that I guess I'd done what I needed to do. That's a choice. Some people take on administrative positions early. They move through they have wonderful careers in administration of business schools, and that's another choice. But I think you need to decide for yourself what is it, and it's where do I want to work? What kind of school do I want to work at? What do I get a kick out of colleagues sort of telling me, implicitly at least, about myself? Is it that they're going to say I'm a wonderful teacher? Is it that they're going to cite one of my papers? Do I really, do I celebrate when I get an R&R at an A journal? Do I just get depressed when I get a... And I think all these things you have to decide for yourself, and then sort of decide what you say yes, what you say no to. And we were having a conversation over dinner last night. I made all the wrong choices early on, but I don't think we're ever locked in to our position. There are always all sorts of ways to move in one direction or in another. Obviously, if I had set myself as an objective to become a faculty at Harvard Business School, I would have unfortunately been disappointed. So I think your aspiration levels have to be sort of in line with what is reasonably expected or expectable, but I think you can stretch it, pull it, and all I can say is this is a wonderful job if you find what works for you. Freedom is, I think, invaluable. I like travel. I don't need to be able to buy myself a yacht. If I did, I should have started Google and probably would have failed. Certainly would have failed. I don't like managing people. When people do a bad job, I don't like telling them. It's even a problem with doctoral students. I don't like telling a doctoral student they're not doing a bad job. They're doing a bad job, but I hope they get the message, or implicitly. But I get a kick out of getting good evaluations in class. I definitely celebrate when I get an R&R in a good journal. It's a major, I guess, moment in my life. I celebrate with my wife and kids who think that, why would anyone write this kind of crap that you can't get past the first page? Even the summary makes no sense at all, and on and on. But so I think that's for us to decide. I've been speaking too long, and now listen to the negative image of what I've just said.
No, I'm going to speak about the positive image, not of what you said.
Oh, so mine was the negative image.
Thank you, Peter. I call him Peter because his mother is American, and he's Peter in Europe and Pierre in the US. I'm going to give you the way he handles things.
So we've been a very old couple.
Yeah.
Ages.
Actually, he seems to be younger than I am. Actually, we could claim we are the same age. He's older. 1 month.
3.
Now, just to give you a feel for where I speak, I'm for diversity. Sibel spoke about diversity at EURAM earlier. I'm really for that. I was the one to suggest this guy to come back as a VP at EURAM. So he's part of the executive committee, and we disagree about everything regarding our profession. But I feel it's important to have all the ways of looking at a profession, at what we do. I agree with him. You need to understand the landscape in which you operate. Actually, in order to understand that landscape, what I did was to publish with a colleague, Stéphane Damron from Dauphine University in Paris, 4 books on the future of business schools. And what we found out, looking at it in depth, is not exactly what it describes. Well, actually, what it describes is an acceptable way of looking at the world. That's not mine. And I'm going to try to convey part of it. I put a question mark at the end of this management academia as a career question mark. I have a point. You probably, you might disagree with that. My point is pretty strong. Academia, to me, is not about a career. In saying so, I'm challenging the word in EECC. At the same time, I fully recognize that you embarked in some form of a career, your career. But if you enter academia with the idea of building your career, I'm not sure you chose the proper sector. If you're on a career, you go into business. Your career. Large organization, small, you build it up, you become king of your world, whatever. If you go to academia, it's because you're interested in ideas. Vibrating, going to a seminar with someone to basically the same topic as yours, but from a totally different angle, and tells you something you had never thought about. Wow, that's academia. Transmitting in the classroom, that's academia. We're not talking about a career, are we? So, the idea of first league, Ivy League, the 50, 20 top schools in the US, and this type of nonsense, disrespect for the other guys. He didn't say that, but that was kind of implicit behind the wording. No, that's not academia.
Does anyone have any poison?
Now, the rules of the game in academia, and we agree that there are rules of the game, are to a certain extent, to a large extent, tacit. Hence, the usefulness of a setting like this one, where we can discuss. Don't listen to the old guys, not that old, by the way, but old guys. Make your own opinion, but sharing, discussing, opening our eyes. Okay? To me, speaking about a session like that, about a career for you, it sounds too much utilitarian. I didn't join academia for that. Now, why did you join academia? Can you think about that for a second, for yourself? Deeply in yourself, why did you join academia? And I would like a few of you to just answer that question. I'm going to give my answer. You will not believe it. My dad didn't do any study, not even high school. I had to go up to a PhD. Nothing was ever said. That was some form of a revenge. And when you go for a PhD, you discover research, and logically, you feel like the world of ideas is good. I have 3 kids. 2 of them work in companies, let's say, and the 3rd one is just finishing her PhD. She is a she. And she's in, would you believe that, classics. Latin, ancient Greek, and ancient philosophy. Doesn't sound like an MBA, does it? Okay, that's why I joined academia. What about, would someone be ready to answer why you joined academia? Yes, yes.
Because I actually love this endless learning. You always learn new things and discuss and think about the environment.
Although practitioners would tell you they do the same, it's particularly true in academia. I like that. Someone else? Yes?
It's pretty much the only place where I fit.
That's another
college people would be like, yeah, you need to get into academia. You should still stick with it. So.
Okay, good. Sibel?
To touch lives while I'm learning and enjoying doing things that I love, learning. And by learning, I can touch lives in academia to change lives of youngsters, people.
Transmission. Yes?
I think it's a way to be always a child and an old man at the same time. It's like a child who is curious, who wants to learn new things and explore new things, but also as a teacher, you're a wise old man transferring this knowledge.
So you're going to change sex before you retire?
By the way, this guy is unbelievable. What kind of joke is that? At least you can be politically correct. Come on. By the way, we have a gender issue. Did you look at the list of the participants? Yeah, way more women than men, except in the organization team. Huh? That's something we should look at. Huh? Anyway, okay, thank you for sharing with us, but ask yourself why you joined and why you want to stick to this academic work. Now, what brought you here? Why did you join this EECC colloquium? And I've listed some ideas, you know, because you have ambition, a career. Why not? Out of frustration already? My goodness, that would be a bit early. Out of curiosity, excitement about, well, you know, getting together and speaking about our future. Yeah, redoing the world. I'm ready for it, whenever you want. It's a noblesse cause, but we should work on it anyway. Do you have worries? Do you feel some pressure you don't like? Which I suspect some of you do at least. If you don't, you'd better start understanding that. Well, you need to be reassured. You know, being with people making the same choices as you did, and we could at least share our ways. Do you want to optimize? You know, getting I'm helping you optimize your career? Question mark. Why did you come? Yes.
Rome is a nice place.
Networking is missing. So
Networking.
Yeah, the prime idea for me was networking.
So it's just a normal conference.
No.
The conference is also about that.
Opening to a new network where I didn't have access.
Okay.
Through my own.
Yes.
I have come for EURAM events for young scholars before, and what I found is this peer support. So there are people who are in similar stage as you, and I have had honest conversations with people about what happens in academia and what happens in that stage of their career. So it has been like a support network for me. That's why I plan to come this year also, because I needed honest discussion about the current stage of my
Okay. Well, what is academia about? I would put it in 3 items, which are debatable, but it's a way of trying to decompose. I can stand up as well, you know. One, it's about teaching. And so about that, it's one. We're being paid primarily to transmit. If you feel you're being paid to research, it's something we might want to discuss a bit. Secondly, indeed, there is research, and research means today publishing. It has meant that for many years now. Publishing in a limited number of journals. That starts being a little bit nasty. Third, institutional engagement. Usual administrative stuff. You know, you heard the last part of his talk. You know, well, don't do that too early, which I understand. Beware of not falling into that trap too early. Of course, but okay, these are the 3 types of contribution. Yes?
What about the core mission of the university, the impact on the society? You forgot about it.
Not quite. Not quite, because I have an example below, which I hope will fit into your counter example. And I agree with you. I didn't put anything. This is a Grenoble example after the war. There were 3 Louis Néel. Néel got the Nobel Prize in physics. Nobel Prize winner. Louis Weil, the father of a very close friend of mine, built the Grenoble University. Okay? He achieved something very specific. He built the university. And when I say built, in all senses of the word, including physical assets. And Paul-Louis Merlin created a company, Merlin-Gérard, which was the leader in its sector and before it was taken over, and today is part of Schneider Electric. Okay? The way you want to leave a footprint belongs to you. Academia opens up to you opportunities to leave the footprint behind you that you choose to try to leave. The problem is, the rules of the game start imposing on you some form of footprint, which you have to do. And that, I feel, is an issue. And this guy basically conveys that story. He's a close friend again, but I don't like what he says. Not to people like you. Because, I mean, this type of thing will end up in frustration. Now, let's try again to decompose. Who expects what from you where you are in your first job? Basically the dean and the rest of the gang expect from you what? Good teaching? Publications? Engagement? Impact on society so that whatever impact measurement will increase? Fine. Now, who expect what from you? Where you belong, where you are today? Your personal environment? Family? The kids asking you what you've done? At some point, that's pressure. Employability, that's the future employers expecting from you specific things. What about yourself? The way you want to look at what you did. You decide the angle from which you want to think about. But it's very important to try to think what you want to fulfill. You cannot do the full spectrum. Second question, what you know you're good at. I should not speak in English. I'm not good in English. But I have no choice. So I do it. But if I could, I would preferably speak in French, because believe it or not, I speak better French than English. What do you like doing? That's a very nasty tacit comment. He said, I don't speak very well French. That's a very nasty comment. You didn't say
me.
No, we spoke about me.
No,
What do you like doing? Being good at and liking doing something might be correlated. It's usually highly correlated, but it's slightly different, okay? The problem is, this guy tells you that because of that and your employability, that you should accept, obey, and accept what the rules of the game tell you. You want to tell me to tell you something about this guy? For that is true for all of us, but he told us. It all started with his mother. Because his mother was American, he went to the US. He was slapped in the face because the research he was conducting was no research according to those guys. He came back, he didn't know where he belonged. I remember, because I talked to him several times along the way, so I could observe. So we went back, and the shot he got again, the same shot, inoculated, vaccinated forever. And then he comes and just tells us the story. The problem is not that he accepted those rules of the game. It wasn't that. He decided to enforce those rules of the game, to preach those rules of the game, to support those rules of the game. He does what he wants. He races the races he wants to race. That's his game. Should he suggest that's a normal part of doing things in academia? I don't buy that. And I like him a lot. Too bad he went the wrong way. Now, it's terrible. We are kind of limited sometimes, especially in the field of strategy. And strategy, we always have 2x2 matrices. And I did the usual thing to combine what? What I do is expected by my employer is not expected by my employer. versus I like it or I'm good at. You could put whatever you want there. I like it, I don't like it. The problem is when you feel that you should do what is expected from your employer while you don't like it. I call that, can you pronounce that for me? Mercenary?
Perfect.
Very nice of you.
Better than in French.
Yeah, mercenaire. Mercenary. You do it by duty because you're being asked, but you don't like it. That's nonsense. I mean, I enjoy in academia to do things I didn't want to do. Of course, in life there are things you have to do because and you're being paid for something, so at least you obey, you align to the institutional objectives. But I mean, that's, to me, research, you wouldn't believe that, I know. It's a hobby. My employer doesn't really care, as long as I write, what format, books or not, as long as it helps the institution be known outside. I do video chronicles, 3 minutes. It's a very difficult exercise, by the way. Anyway, I do that. And my institution like it a lot. Because at least someone from my institution is known via the videos outside, etc. Well, anyway, I do that as a hobby because I like it. Much better than being mercenary in research, I tell you. You do whatever. I'm no example. I'm no model. I'm just illustrating my point. Okay? I don't use myself as. I'm not bragging as you did. No, you didn't. I know you didn't. Should you feel fit to what he described, just do it. We'll be proud of you. Because you like it. That's your game. Play your game. Should you feel not fit for it, please think about it twice before listening to this guy. Are you with me? I have a last slide with a set of points which I'm going to cover briefly. Now, to me, the research part of academia and the teaching part is about leaving a footprint. It can be intellectual, it can be transmission to your alumni over the years. I couldn't find an English wording for it. Some of you I know understand how to speak French. Faire école. Could someone help me to translate that into English? To set up a school of thought. Faire école. Your own school in a way. Because people who were around you were nurtured by what you conveyed, what you did with them. Faire école. I wish you to faire école. Maybe you want to coin a concept, an idea. I mean, open innovation, blue ocean strategy, balanced scorecard. You name them. There are plenty of those. Well, even bottom of the pyramid, even core competencies. People will leave their name to history in manuals. You see how it is? Anyway, now, develop a theory, something, ideas which do not exist. And you then go, wow, that's very ambitious. If you can do that, wow. There you leave a very strong intellectual footprint. Indeed. At least a framework, if not a full theory. Okay. Anyway, ask yourself about what would be your dream, and then your reasonable objectives below the dream. What makes you run? What makes you work instead of playing ping pong at night? Ping pong. I'm no example. I'm no model. I just did it. I did what you might call a dual career. Very early on, when I started, I decided I didn't want, sorry about that, to be just an academic. I felt personally I wanted that I wanted to be able to shape reality. I did it in a strange way where I didn't shape very much in consulting. I created a consulting firm right from the beginning. In the early days, you could. It was thinkable. Nowadays, it's just impossible. And I don't want to suggest to you that you might follow the same path because it's just not feasible because of the pressure you have on the academic life nowadays. But that dual career I really like because I got plenty of experience from practice because I was within organization as a consultant for many months or many years sometimes. And this is so enriching in terms of what you can convey in the classroom afterwards. You also understand immediately in executive education how the practitioners react because you know them by heart. I really like that. Financially, that helped as well. Okay. Don't try to do that early. The problem is, what I'm going to tell you is kind of shocking. So I'll say it anyway because I think it. I've tried to replicate my own model to open branches in different countries. So I would try to spot an academic whom I could hire on the consulting side to operate a new office for us. And I run after colleagues. I can tell you, there is a certain age after which it's impossible to go back to some form of practice, to lose the autonomy that we have in academia. What is the age limit? That's not very scientific. I have my own guess about it, about 35. When you've done your PhD, the time you get potentially tenure, because of course I was chasing tenured guys, otherwise it's not feasible in the system of today. Well, before that it was impossible. So I spoke only at people, the age of 35, 40, whatever. And you see the switch doesn't work. I'm not saying they're spoiled for practice. I'm saying that it's no longer fit. So don't try to think, I'll do it in sequence. You can always do a little bit of consulting on the side, like many of our colleagues do, a little bit. I'm talking about, I did it full scale. I hired people, etc. With systematic client base, and so on and so forth. Okay. Third, there is no choice. You have to think strategically about what you're going to do. So think about your institutional setting, the one you are in today and the one you might be looking for tomorrow. And what would be the expectations? Peter briefly mentioned that. I would like to stress my own understanding of what we have in Europe. In most countries in Europe, not all, we have a pretty thick bureaucratic system of a higher education, which is basically open to nationals, extremely difficult for non-nationals to enter the system. That's the case of France, Italy, Spain, I would argue Germany as well. It is not the case in the UK, it is not the case in the Netherlands, which are probably the two countries in Europe which are the more geared in the same way as the US. They want the full scope. Now, beyond this first layer, there is a rather thin, though extremely expanding layer of international positions. And that's a mercato. And it's a global mercato. Because you're not talking about a country, you're not talking about Europe, you're talking about an international market. Okay? So you have a thin layer on top of a very bureaucratic system. Now, where do you want to belong? Depending where you want to belong, which game you want to play, you've got to realize the price you will have to pay. Well, I'm a golf player, and it helped me to write above par because you want to play below par, right? And you're a golf player as well, Peter. He used to play in the Mecca and to live in the Mecca of golf, St. Andrews. He was the dean at the business school in St. Andrews, and his office was on the 17th, was it? Correct. Of the old St. Andrews.
That's why I joined the profession.
Yeah, that's. Okay, when I say be above par, I mean be better than. Okay, but in golf you would say below par. Okay, in the classroom, that's the point you made, and I agree with you. I agree with you. Because what he presented was essentially geared towards research. He had a very interesting second part, a bit shorter though. And he made the point that teaching is very important in our life, academic life, professional. Be above par in the classroom. That will pay off. That will pay off. And this is also why we are being paid in a way. And research, not so much what, but how, the way you conduct research, it's the way you like. That's my personal recommendation. Not because you are asked to publish in those kinds of starred journals, counting stars. Why are they stars? Because you don't read anymore. You just count stars. So you're writing papers not to be read?
No, read by a select few.
Oh yeah, select few, a handful.
Yes.
How
You
can you
read
preach
research
that?
in math, or research in physics, or research in biology.
But what
I
about the
don't.
practitioners down the road?
They read other journals.
Oh my goodness. Now, a few quick points, and I will stop. And
They
discuss.
think Harvard Business Review is research.
I know.
So do you.
No. No. It's a Harvard Guru journal to be to publicize. Okay. Careful. You went through your PhD thesis. I did a quick sample testing, asking each one of you through the speed dating who had gone through a PhD in articles and a full dissertation. Nowadays, everybody seems to be switching to papers, and there was one case of a full dissertation, and the person in the room almost apologized for it. And I said I fully disagreed, and I really liked that she was a she, but so many women anyway. But that's good. But I said, I think it's very good to write a full dissertation. At least once in your life, you go deep into a topic and you write a full piece. And you have all how many pages you want? You just develop. Articles, papers, you're just, explaining your ideas in a format which you didn't choose. You like that? I didn't join academia for that. Anyway, beyond your PhD work, move on. You cannot just keep digging the same topic that you chose with a supervisor. So keep doing that if you wish, but at least open a new front of your own that belongs to you. I made the point I wanted to make about the PhD by papers, which is something, the joke I make? Why do you write PhD by papers? Because it's faster to get published papers to get a job. I have a recommendation for you. Publish before conducting the research. That's faster. More productive. What a shame. Anyway, books. Yes?
But many of the PhD students don't have a choice over that. They have to do what we are just entering the institution.
The problem is those guys.
Entrepreneurs.
The problem is those guys. Those guys push for articles. Why? Because they will co-author some of the articles.
And also,
We're in Rome, you can crucify me at the end.
It's lions, actually.
Sorry?
It's lions.
Lions? What do you mean? Oh,
but,
you're
I
right.
mean, there is also reason. For example, in Finland, young scholars always have to write for private foundation grants. And if you don't have publication, it's very difficult to get a research grant from a private foundation in Finland. We don't have money coming from the university for young scholars.
The system, because our colleagues, our community, it's our fault. Not only did we import the rules of the game coming from, this is not American bashing. Huh? No. I mean, because we imported the rules of the game from there, Not only do we import them, we enforce them. We accepted them. And now all the system loops back. And indeed, the foundation and everything is coherent in a way. Makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me, but it makes sense as a system. Okay? Books. Peter was kind of subtle and nice about it. He mentioned he wrote books in the past. But today he knows it's a waste of time for your career. He didn't say it because he knew I was here. I would have jumped. I mean, to think that writing a book is useless, it's an insult to human mind. Come on. None of the big writers would have made it in today's academia. The issue of co-authorship, you've got to be strategic about it. Selecting with whom you're going to write. He was unlucky. He did plenty of experimentation and indeed bumped into your preferred co-author, which was a way to get into some journals because the guy knew essentially the rules of the game, which is one way of doing it. By the way, this means you're giving away the wealth of what you have in hands, your database, whatever. You didn't know, you were not even aware that was a gold mine. Anyway, you're giving away so that you can get a paper. What is that? Some form of what? Prostitution or something? Sorry, Peter. I didn't mean that for you. Because you're not like that. I spoke earlier about self-plagiarism. This is just crazy. I mean, come on. We always have the same ideas. We are structured the way we are. We view the world with our history, and so the idea that something we did some years ago we cannot reuse, recycle sounds bad, but reshape, and I mean, I don't like the idea that in a conference you cannot come with ideas you've already presented in a former paper, an older version. I feel uneasy about that. No, that's not the way we think. I'm open. Relate to practice. Theory is fine too. But at the end of the day, a long day, at the end of the journey, if what we do has nothing to do whatsoever with what those guys are doing out there, we should ask ourselves why we claim we do things in management. So then I look back to impact on the territory. One last bit. Looking at, I try to stay away from the content of the books we published regarding the understanding of the competitive arena of business schools. Just briefly, a few things. The sector is booming. You chose a pretty booming field in academia. You knew that. About 20% of the students worldwide, more than that for graduate studies, study in management, one way or another, in most of the developed countries. Slightly below 20% for undergrad, slightly above for graduate students. So it's really a fantastic market. It's a fantastic business. The business is funded by economic players, companies, not just by governments or states or chambers of commerce. All those people are involved now. But companies pay for executive education. Hence, that funds part of what we have to fund in business game. So that's very good, except the rules of the game are just great. We thought because of the rankings and because of accreditation, the forces to strategic convergence, all business schools being bound to do the same thing, were the strongest. In the last book, and we had this belief, in the last book we published, we have 23 countries where we have a description of the landscape in business schools. And what we observe is not a strategic convergence. What we observe is the following. the embeddedness is very strong in the social and political setting of where business schools belong. This applies to HEC, very much so. If you look at the board, everything's very, they claim that they are international. They are very open to the international. All the teaching takes place in an environment where they think international. They think global, except the place. Don't take it badly, but that's a fact. It is in fact very, very, very fragile because of all the players. So the faculty is very international. That's a different story.
Students.
Yes, okay, but the embeddedness is very strong. And the fundraising takes place essentially at home. So you have a strong drive of many places to become global. Only a few places are truly global. I would put in that category, Stephanie Medamon, of course, and myself, would put INSEAD, IND, probably LBS. Maybe a little bit of Instituto Empresarial, but that's about it. Harvard is very American, very international, but embedded in America. Okay? So the setting, the view of the world that there would be the top tier player, which would be global, much more complex. I will go further. You read the first chapter of volume 2, which just came out, of our book, The Future of Management Education. You Google Thomas Durand, Stéphane Damon, The Future of Management Education, that will come out. You take volume 2, you read the first chapter, and that describes the whole story. I stop here and we can discuss. Well, Star journals. So are you trying to enter the race for more stars in your list of references? Because you would follow this one. And exactly as you said, I would respect you a lot if you make this choice. But do it conscientiously. Do it on purpose. Do it because you know what you're doing and you're ready to pay the price, or because you like it. Whatever your reason, these are respectable, but be aware of it. If you do that because there is pressure on you and you don't like it, it's unfair. Did I counterbalance his, because he was good, huh? He's a good teacher.
At least one thing.
He's also a good friend.
No, it was.
Yes.
Can I just make a comment, please? I would like to defend Peter because
Bash
I really
him.
find
Go.
it difficult to agree with the things you were saying. It's great to hear another perspective, but if I look at the things that I was told for the past 3 or 4 years, it's just
everything to what you have just said. So I think I would definitely follow what Pierre was saying. And I think very important for us as well, during this early career stage, if we don't follow the right route, if we don't get engaged in education, I think it can really stop us. So you are talking from a perspective of an experienced scholar who has a permanent position, whereas here most of us are on fixed-term contracts. So I feel like if we really want to achieve something, we need to follow this route, whether we like it or not. But then another thing that I think about is if we are in the academia, we should like publishing, we should like doing the research, because this is a very important part of our life.
I'm for publishing. I'm fully for it. I'm not saying you shouldn't be publishing. You should be publishing. You should write. I write so much. I don't like a standardized paper formatted all in the same way. I'm going to tell you the story of, I won't give the name, although I could, but we are taped, so I don't give you. It's incredible. A place, business school somewhere. They decided to organize themselves in a Taylorian way. There is a guy specialized in introduction. The guy specialized in also methodological part. The guy specialized in table for stats. The guy specialized in the discussion. And the guy specialized for the conclusion. And they were able to get out a bunch of, I don't know how many there were, 20 papers. Yeah, 20 papers in about a year. And they call that productivity. Because their school went up the ladder of the ranking. Shame on them. I don't call that ranking. I don't call that. He is not in favor of that. I'm not accusing him of supporting that type of behavior. Of course not. Of course not. But this shows how perverse the system can become. But you make your own choice. You got some messages and you're consistent with it. And we talk in a few years from now, you'll be successful, I'll be so happy for you. You'll be frustrated, I'll feel sorry. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thomas, I think there's something there in the question, and I agree with you, 90% of the time. And I think there's a lot of path dependency in the inner context in which academics work. Deans demand X, they demand Y, demand Z. And the career path is almost the architecture is through the 4x4-star journal articles, and then you get through your tenure, so on. Now, what you're saying is to me a very enlightened view, and I'll build on that tomorrow, is to do with it's not a bad thing to consider a portfolio of research publications, not simply a 4-star journal.
Diversity.
Kind of, this is one of the things that I'm struggling with now, is finding the right co-authors. And you were talking about don't, prostitute yourself out to get a co-author. Do you have any advice on, you mentioned pick the right ones, any suggestions or?
Can I make one? If someone starts haggling about who's the first author before you've even looked at the data or written one line, run away. I mean, it's a nightmare. The best co-author is one each time you send him or her the paper for revision, he changes the order of the authors to put himself at the bottom or herself at the bottom. At least you know that what they want is to work together. They think the size of the pie matters more than their share of the pie. I think that is horrendous, and it makes for terrible relationships. You might not care about the order of the authors at the beginning, but if you feel you're getting, I'm sorry for my language, screwed, you tend to react, and it just basically goes from bad to worse. So that's a tiny little piece of advice, but I've had some very bad experiences.
Selecting co-authors, it's a combination of several environments, several dimensions. It's not just a social mechanism by which someone is friendly, so you want to write with someone. It helps. You've got to get similar, not the same, but similar wavelength or complementary wavelength intellectually. So that's the alliance that you make something. Then the statutes of this person, understanding what has already been published, what type of journal, whether you fit in. So it's an assessment. You don't just dive because you've networked in an event like this one. Of course, you need to get out from here with a short list. You spotted people, that could work. Okay? And then you're going to spend time in the coming month to check. And you will meet again, and and you provoke some more interaction, and that's the way to do it. That's a long-term dating, not speed. So
I would like to thank you very much for your complimentary view on the careers in academia.
So one each.
It's interesting to have the debate.
This guy is just about counting. Counting stars, counting. It's just about measurement. The depth of organization, understanding what's going on, the how, not the what, not the how many. Kills me.
And hence my question, because I think many of us here are entering academia and starting looking for a job. And this is, I would like to have your opinion as recruiters, because I guess you participate to recruitment in your institutions. And I would like to know what is your view about how to assess our passion for the job. How do you assess that we love teaching in a world where we count stars? How do you assess, I don't know, our intellectual curiosity or things like this that are not so tangible? Because I think it may be true for many of us. We love what we want to do or what we already do, meaning research, maybe have our intellectual curiosity and everything. And yes, so how do you assess that when you recruit a new faculty member? And how do you think it is against the rules of the game? Because I feel a little bit my colleagues here. In the end, the recruitment commissions, they are just counting stars. Or what is your view as recruiters or youngsters?
I really like very much if those from Intel. One day saying, because we're asking, what's the criteria to select someone? And he spoke about his old days when he was in the committee. There were 3 appointed from the faculty and a committee of 6 to select people they would hire, recruit, or promote. And he would say, of course, we would look at the list of publication briefly. Of course, we would make sure that this person can teach. It's a condition, necessary condition that you have absolutely need to have. But at the end of the day, we ask ourselves always, what is it that this person will bring special to himself? I like this type of person. So interviewing is essential. I'm trying to get that feeling from this person. You get it from the type of work, the style in the writing, the way issues are being expressed, formulated, articulated. But beyond that, yes, each case is very single. And what you want to identify is the inside fire. Let me give you an example. I took as a postdoc in my team this year a young woman. She had gone for a PhD where she worked on tired leaders, bad sleep. Okay. In her defense jury, there was someone who was a professor in medicine. Because of that, she was kind of rejected by our community. That's not management. Hell, it is management. I mean, come on. People need sleep, need to be in good shape, to make decisions, to act, to embark, to etc. And she had, of course, the usual finding. She did the quantitative work, by the way, and I hired her. I'm an open guy, and she came to the conclusion that someone tired would make poor decisions. Well, that's counterintuitive. Huh? And then she had a second very interesting result. She did that with entrepreneurs. And she checked what they were doing with ideas, whether they were capable of exploiting ideas. And the result was, and that's a gem, someone tired would go beyond what a reasonable, normal guy would do with an idea because being tired. At 4 o'clock in the morning, drinking a beer, you may have ideas which you wouldn't have if, like me, you sleep enough. That's an interesting result. First time I see someone advocate for not sleeping enough as a manager. Well, that is very inspiring. And the fact that she decided to study that her supervisor and herself had the idea of bringing in a professor of medicine, is very open-mindedness. And our community is closed. It has nothing to do with it. You see?
At this point, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
So you think it's valued to borrow from other disciplines?
It is difficult. Everybody has only one word, multidisciplinarity, and in fact, everybody speaks about it and nobody likes really, because we operate in silos. A handful of people are going to read your paper, but they are very selective. Only the one who can understand. The other guys don't even read it.
Is there time for one more question? I'm so happy that you talked. I think Professor Durand, that should be the ideal of every academy. And,
2 to 1.
I know that we have been fed this thing that, you have to publish, and then even in the institution that I work, we have to publish even when a paper is not ready. There is huge pressure to submit. And this is the ideal because many of the articles that are published nowadays in management journals are, it's so stupid. They found 2 variables, there is a correlation, and you write an article about it. There is no real managerial implication of several articles.
I wish it were that simple.
No, some of the articles are really garbage, you must say that. So I'm really
Carefully
happy that
crafted
you talked about
garbage.
it. And this is the ideal that we should have, in our board for 10 years from now. But I think, right now we are, as everybody said, we are in this institutional setup that we cannot break out so easily right now, at least in my case. Because we have to have an earning, we have to have something coming into our bank account every month.
As you might guess, I really appreciate what you say. Thank you. 2 points. One, EURAM is a home for everybody.
Sorry?
EURAM is a home for everybody, regardless of what the choices you make. Please come back to EURAM. Diversity is the key word. Second, those of you who are going to choose to play by the game imposed onto you, and who are going to be successful at it, normally, logically, will defend those rules because they were successful at them. If knowing what you know today, when you will have been successful, you would defend diversity, you would do a good deed for the community.
Can I say something?
Please.
I believe both of you are wrong. Or right. No, you are like...
-1, -1.
So I'm back to 0.
You are that up and this stuff, like opposite sides of continuum. I believe there must be something in the middle. So we need to follow certain rules, but also enjoy in doing what we are doing. No one here is so rich that can do research only for himself and just put there on his table so that no one reads, that you don't need to publish that, you don't need to be employed at university. But at the same time, if you are just like trying to do something that you don't like, then it's not probably best choice in our life. So maybe both of you are right or wrong. Only thing that I don't agree with you maybe is I'm pretty sure that you don't wear same hat when you are choosing candidates as you are having now, when you are talking about this idealistic things like doing research just for fun.
Come and visit me in Paris and I will show you.
Okay.
He'll hire you.
You see, we're trying to avoid bloodshed later on, so we find a way how we both can stay friends.
That's nice.
And I'd like to add on this. So I think it's possible to find a synthesis in what you say, because generally it doesn't have to be bad that there is something you're up against, some resistance, something you might not like, something you have to do.
This is also a possibility to grow. And like when you go to the gym, what you do with to get muscles is really work against resistances. And that might be something that is helpful to actually find out what you want and who you are and what you're interested in, and if academia is something like that. So maybe what Pierre said is not so bad. But on the other hand, I think the big problem is that people get scared by this. So you are looking at a system that is very strong and that makes life difficult for you. And I don't think that this is necessary either. You can be very proud in going to the system. We don't have to be that much afraid that we get lost somewhere. I don't think that we will mess up our life completely if we get out of the system. yeah, there will be a good way to earn money somewhere else. So really working with that pressure to do something is nothing that should make us small or feeling scared in a way, but something that we can really engage with for a certain reason and accept that it is there. And it's even more interesting for someone who does organizational study and institutional studies, because this is exactly what we're up against. So we can actually learn from that and reflect on that. So that's an added value of being in our discipline. And then again, I would say what the EECC is about is really to see others in the same situation and then develop this pride and develop this confidence that we can engage with the whole thing. With all the things that you said about what we want to do and where we want to go, and really then also find ourselves and our strengths and our interests, and really get a better understanding of them, because we are up against something else that helps us reflecting.
We have to stop. So what we can do is to eat together for lunch.
Not you and me.
Let me thank our special guest for the great presentation.
Much welcome, and also interested audience. I just learned that our third presenter unfortunately cannot be here, so we are not really in a hurry. Meaning that we have around 20 minutes time for presentation, and afterwards we will have a discussion. Keep in mind there is one huge incentive, which is the conference in Reykjavik, which you might can go. But of course, even if Reykjavik is not your go-to-go, we would like to help you in developing your paper further. So it's publishable, or even for yourself will help you in your academic career to progress. So with that in mind, we will come every constructive feedback will be that you present. Then I've prepared a little bit of comments, and then everyone can join and ask questions, of course, towards the paper. So with that, I ask you to start your presentation.
Thank you very much.